So let's start out with the positive. At least we do not have to wear face masks slash diapers on an airplane anymore. That's the good news. The bad news is we're dealing with an unprecedented level of delays, cancellations, near misses. Lots of problems going on right now with the airlines, with air traffic control, with the FAA. And I want to get to the bottom of it. I want to have a really frank talk so we can all understand what the heck is going on and cut through some of the BS we've been told, because I think there might be a lot of that. And listen, maybe we can't handle the truth. I don't know, but we're going to try. Joining me now is former FAA Deputy Administrator Dan Elwell. Dan, thank you so much for being with me. I have so many questions for you, but I want to just cut to the chase here. How bad is it going to get before it gets better?
Yeah, well, you are cutting straight to the chase, aren't you? I don't think it's particularly bad now. I know it feels that way. And I don't think it's going to get much worse with delays and that kind of thing. What we've seen at Newark and what we saw at Denver, I don't think that's going to get worse. There's always a chance that it will. Summer season's coming, the highest travel season, air travel season of the year. So that alone could make things more delayed. But I don't think technically, equipment-wise, it should get much worse.
So I'll tell you something that I've been noticing, especially for the last several years, and I suspect it's COVID related, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just a coincidence. But I'll tell you, after the airlines, started having all the mandates with the vaccines and the masks and all of that, I think you saw a lot of pilots and a lot of flight attendants and maybe people on the ground in the crew. I think that a lot of people maybe left the profession. Now, I don't have the stats to give you to back that up, but I noticed it as someone who travels weekly that it seemed like after COVID, you lost people from the industry. Maybe they didn't want to do it anymore. And it's understandable because enforcing the mask rules and then dealing with the vaccine mandates and all this, it got to be pretty miserable for a lot of the folks that work in the industry. But that's just an anecdote. But I've noticed that, especially because I fly into New York basically weekly, I have found this very interesting, another coincidence, and I want to know if you see where I'm going with this. I live in Nashville. We've got crazy weather in Nashville. We've got tornadoes. We've got thunderstorms. We've got hail. We've got intense rain. It's wild. My plane will usually take off from Nashville, even if something's kind of crazy going on in the area, unless it's like a tornado in the sky, right? But I've noticed flying out of JFK or Newark or LaGuardia, they often say, well, traffic is backed up due to clouds. And I'm like, wait a second here. This seems like you're lying to me. So you got to tell me, can they really not fly because of the clouds, or is there something else going on?
So when there are clouds, as you say, or what we usually just say weather, and instrument approaches are required for an airplane, for a pilot to get into an airport, then there's greater separation than we give between airplanes when it is clear. When we use visual separation, we can get more airplanes landing an hour and taking off an hour than usual. If we're in instrument conditions, is what we call it, and we have to fly in instruments in the weather, in clouds, then the separation is greater because we're not using see and avoid. And the line gets longer, the arrivals are more spread out. And for the really congested airports like Newark and LaGuardia and Atlanta and Chicago, it can really, by midday, it can get pretty bad. And then as the day goes on, if the weather stays, it can get longer. But I'll tell you something, the biggest frustration from my friends, my lay friends, is how can I be delayed? I'm looking at clear skies. But the whole system is interrelated. So you could have ground holds in one city that affects your departure time in a city that's clear with no weather. So it's a very, very complex system. And I was a pilot, as you probably know, for 16 years, a commercial pilot, and was accused any number of times of making things up or lying to the passengers. But I, in 16 years, never did, and I never knew a pilot who did. So you can trust you're getting the straight scoop.
Well, I don't think the pilots are the ones lying. I think it's the airlines. And I'll tell you why I tend to believe that. And then you can dispel this if I'm way off track here. So because I fly weekly, I do a little thing called Flight Aware. And I track that sucker from its original origin. And so when they tell me, oh, because there was weather where it was from, I'm like, that's weird because I've been tracking this plane all the way back to this morning and it's not been flying anywhere where there's weather. And oh, believe me, because I've been delayed hours and hours, I go and I check the weather in every little area. I check the radar. I follow the flight path. I'm like a pigeon with this stuff because I'm like, listen, if I'm being lied to, I don't like it. But then we come up against the issue of the pilot's timeout, the crew times out, they just cancel the flight. And I found that if the flight ends up being closer to the last flight of the day, or the pilots are needed somewhere else, or they're needed to be back in a certain area, it seems like it's kind of arbitrary sometimes when the airlines go, oh, now we just got to cancel it. And I'm like, well, there are other flights that are taking off, but the weather's bad, right? So it feels like perhaps you could give us a little bit of intel on some of the shenanigans that the airlines pull to maybe save their bottom line or protect their scheduling. Is there more to the story?
But I think you have it right, Tomi. Airlines do have to make decisions, hundreds of decisions every day with their network. And they do have a priority. They have a preference to airplanes that are carrying passengers that have multiple connections. And I don't mean the passenger has a multiple connection, but the airplane coming into a hub has 160 passengers, and out of that 160, maybe 80% are connecting. Or they will have an airplane that needs to get to a city that evening, as you said, the end of the day, because it's the first plane out the next day. There's innumerable scenarios that airlines come up against, and sometimes they are so complex that if a pilot was on the PA explaining every nuance of it, it would be probably not listened to. A lot of times they do involve weather, and the weather is tertiarily attached to your flight, but it's not obvious.
Yeah.
And by the way, I use FlightAware every time I fly. It's a great app.
And I always see the little thing on FlightAware like LGA experiencing delays due to volume. LGA experiencing delays due to low clouds. So I saw this, and this happened to me a couple weeks ago. I'm still salty about it. My flight got canceled after being delayed for many, many hours. We went all the way out onto the tarmac. Then we came back. They said we had to get gas. That was all for show. We got gas, and then they canceled the damn thing. And so I ended up at an airport hotel, and wouldn't you know it, there were a couple of pilots that were next to me. And I said, I got to ask a question here. Is this all BS with the low clouds? And they're like, yeah, it is. And then I said, what about the private planes? Do the private planes fly in these dangerous low clouds? And they're like, yeah, they operate on different rules. So tell me about that. If a PJ can take off safely, why can a commercial plane not?
Well, there are different rules. What the airline pilots follow is Part 121 operations. Part 121 is the regulation. And those are probably the strictest air service rules that there are in the system. Private pilots follow a different regulation. They're still safe, very safe, but they don't have quite as many requirements as Part 121, the commercial air carriers. So there's a lot of talk out in the system on any given day, and a lot of conjecture, because sometimes not even the pilots have the full picture of what the airline is doing with a particular plane. And I can tell you, as a former pilot myself, commercial pilot, it's frustrating. It really is. So I'm not that surprised that you saw pilots at the hotel and got that reaction.
And I always find that the pilots, like, they want to get people where they're going. Like, they seem just as frustrated as anybody. Flight attendants too, because they're not actually making money for all the delays, right? So I think that the crew inside, they actually really want us all to get where we need to go. They don't want to deal with the frustration and all the craziness. I blame the airlines, to be honest with you. I think that they're looking out for their bottom dollar, and I think if they strand people places, they don't really give a hoot. And if they can say it's weather, they don't really have to accommodate you with much. So I think there's a lot of that going on. They'll never be honest about it. We'd need like somebody to blow the whistle on that one. But in terms of air traffic control and the shortage that we have, there's been also some discussion about maybe raising the retirement age for those air traffic controllers. I understand it's a very tiring and taxing job. But do you think that we could raise that retirement age and maybe keep some people on the job longer and lessen some of the demands that we have on our current air traffic control system?
Oh, definitely. I think if they raise the retirement age for the controllers, then obviously we'd have more controllers and have more time to get replacement controllers. That's kind of a touchy subject with a pilot like myself. We airline pilots fly to 65, and we've always considered our job to be fairly high pressure. And so when we hear that controllers feel that they have to retire at 56 because it's just too difficult a job, but quite frankly, we kind of chuckle at that. Yeah, Secretary Duffy put out a ruling or a policy that he would allow controllers to fly to 61 if they voluntarily applied to fly from 56 to 61. They can currently ask to fly 1 year at a time to 61 beyond 56 today. In their contract, they're allowed to do that. But I'll tell you something. When Secretary Duffy made that proclamation, the controller union passed an amendment telling their membership that anyone who accepted that 5-year extension would immediately be stripped of their seniority on the day that they start that extension. And so when you have things like that happening, when you've got the secretary and the system trying to keep more controllers, very experienced controllers on the job, and the union makes a move like that, it's very frustrating for the regulators and for the leaders
I'm sure
in the government who are trying to fix it. Yeah.
We know that unions are important, but sometimes the way that they throw the weight around there, I think sometimes it's too heavy-handed, and it's disappointing in a lot of cases. I wish some of these unions stuck up for their members during the vaccine mandate times as much as they are about the retirement age. That would have been something I thought they could have fought harder for, but everything's political these days, unfortunately. So let's talk about air traffic controllers, though, because, to me, every time I get a flight delayed or canceled or whatever, and I discover it's because we have a lack of air traffic controllers, too much volume, whatever, I think to myself, pay these people more. Like, if there's ever an essential job where we could pay people more, I don't think you should make $15 an hour flipping burgers at McDonald's in California. But if we need to pay people a little bit more to do that job, I'm like, I think we would all, in a bipartisan way, be like, pay these people more. I need to get where I'm going. Mm-hmm. So do you think that they need to be paid more for what they do?
Well, look, I'm never going to deny somebody getting more money for doing a very important job. And it's a very important job, but they are paid very well. Controllers are the highest paid employees in all of FAA, more than the head of the FAA, more than the head of air traffic control. They get paid very well. And proof, I think, of that is it's an exciting career. There is no shortage of applicants on a given.
Really?
No, on a given twice a year, a call is put out for folks to take the test, for applicants to take the test that whether you qualify to become a controller. We get roughly about 10,000 or more applicants for less than 1,000 openings. Or 1,000 openings every application cycle, or at least that was true when I was last at the FAA, and I think it still holds true today. I like what Secretary Duffy did. He gave a bonus, he gave a raise to controllers in the schoolhouse when they go to the schoolhouse, because that's pretty low pay that first year. Yeah. So he bumped that up, and he wanted that bumped up, and I think that makes a lot of sense. But they top out in pretty decent 6-figure salaries, and but of course, if we have the money in the government to pay those folks, those very important, hardworking folks, more, I'm all for it.
I think we just need to entice good folks to want to do the job. And I'm glad to hear that there are people that want to do it, because the word on the street I've been hearing is people don't necessarily want that job, or they're not signing up in the numbers that we need. So that's encouraging to hear. How much could AI help this all out? And do you have concerns, as somebody who's been in this industry a long time, do you have concerns that AI, not only would take jobs, but that perhaps computer learning could make some big mistakes and cause a lot of problems if it's not perfect?
Yeah, I'm not an AI expert by any stretch, and I do follow it in my current occupation, and I think AI as a tool for the FAA would make a lot of sense. Not clear yet if AI is going to be or could be helpful in air traffic controlling. But I'm sure there are ways that it could help lessen the load. What I think AI would be helpful for in the FAA is to lessen the workload of many of the other professionals at FAA who currently do transactional things or who are doing things manually that can be done through automation or through AI. And I don't think that it will that will lose jobs, that folks at the FAA will lose jobs from AI, especially since we're already short-staffed in so many tracks within FAA. So I think bringing on AI and better software programs would be a great addition to the FAA, especially actually software enhancements to air traffic control would be very helpful.
Are the systems we have super outdated? Because they show them and they look pretty dang outdated. I mean, if you'd show the systems to a Gen Z, they would have no idea what it was. It looked like something out of Oz, right? It's like, whoa, this seems really old. I understand it's expensive, but I think that there's been some work done to modernize it. I wonder why it's taken so long. Like, if you can get a new iPhone every year, why is it taking this long to upgrade some of these systems? It seems mind-boggling.
Yeah. Well, the FAA has a process for any equipment that is used for safety of flight, and it has to have a resiliency, and there has to be data that shows that the new technology is basically flawless before it can be put into prime time, used for actually moving aircraft. So that does take time, and you can't just, it's not like the software world where you put something in your phone and see if it works. If it doesn't, you put out a new iteration. It has to be right the first time, and the FAA has to be 100% sure that any adaptation that they make to air traffic control, let's say, is right the first time. So that takes time. Having said that, the system today the legacy system we're using today is very outdated. And there's technology available that has been proven over and over again in the private sector that could be used for FAA traffic management right now. But the procurement process at the FAA is Byzantine. It's incredibly bureaucratic, and that has to change. And I think this is the administration that can change it for sure. But we got to be able to field things that work, that we know work quickly. And we're not able to do that today.
Yeah, well, I know Sean Duffy personally, obviously, and I think that he'll get to the bottom of it. He's a real can-do individual, and I think that he's working as fast as he possibly can to cut through the bureaucratic red tape. If we can send Katy Perry to space, I feel like we could modernize our systems. But that's just me looking at it, obviously, as a passenger who gets very frustrated when things go awry at the airport, in the airplane, whatever it may be. So, and as we conclude here, what tips from a former pilot, somebody who's been at the top levels of all of this, what advice would you give to passengers? Just with the whole experience, is there like any tips or tricks or hacks that we should know to maybe move ourselves up on the line, rebook our flights faster? Where should we sit on the airplane? Anything that you can give us from your special, knowledge in all of this that we could use?
Yeah, so I think that use every tool that is available to you to know as much about your trip, both before you book it and after you book it and you want to follow, like you mentioned. FlightAware, I think, is a great tool. Don't rely exclusively on it. FlightAware doesn't tell you all of the things that an airline is dealing with on a given day, but FlightAware is a good tool. Use the app. I'm on the board of an airline, and I'm surprised how many regular flyers do not have an airline's app on their phone. They're all slightly different, but the airline app will give you a tremendous amount of information. Those are the two biggest things for travel. The other things, if you don't have TSA PreCheck, I've had it forever. I actually think it works. It works well. Getting to the airport early. I have friends that put it go right down to the minute Why? Get there an hour early, have a cup of coffee, but get to the airport early because we know how difficult the lines can be sometimes. So, and I don't know, some airlines might be annoyed with me for saying this, but I don't check bags if I don't have to. Not because I think they're going to get lost, but I just that kind of bogs me down when I travel, and I travel a lot.
Yeah, I don't check bags anymore either because they do get lost. I actually had one time where they put my luggage on a later flight that was flying out at midnight just simply because they didn't have room. And so they thought, we'll just shove it onto this next flight. That sounds good. Yeah, I don't have a lot of love for a lot of the airlines. And I know you're on the board of an airline, so I'm not going to ask you your favorite airline, but I am going to ask you your favorite and least favorite airport.
That's dangerous too for me to say.
Well, there's got to be one that you're like, wow, this one's efficient, or God, don't ever fly me out of here.
Yeah.
And I think Newark right now would probably be the least favorite of a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, what's your take on it for those that fly often or don't fly at all? Is there a particular airport that you think, boy, they got this down?
Well, I'm gonna give you sort of a partial answer. I really like to fly into a small airport whenever I can. The lines are shorter. It's easier to grab a rental car or an Uber. You're off the airplane and on the street in a fast minute. So I really do like flying, and I just think that they're cool. A lot of them are historical. But if I can get into and out of a small airport, I will try to do that. Having said that, Dulles is one of my home airports. I live in the DC area. I know that they've got plans for that airport. One of the plans, I hope, is to stop the people mover thing. I find that to be kind of cumbersome. And I really like flying into and out of DCA. That's the airport I will try to get to most often. I'm a little bit closer to it. But
right.
Beyond that,
yeah,
that's about it.
Well, I'll give you mine. I think Nashville's got a great airport, and I have a lot of good luck out of Nashville. The TSA is pretty good here. They've got it streamlined. They open up a lot of lanes. I think Nashville is a great airport, and I'm not just saying because I live in Nashville. And the worst airport is every airport in New York. They're awful. They're absolutely awful. And LaGuardia looks nice now, and Newark looks nice now, but guess what? They cancel your flight for clouds. And I know there's a conspiracy, and one day I'm going to get to the bottom of it, Dan. But thank you for giving us all the tips and the tricks and the inside knowledge. I really appreciate it. And fly safe. I hope that you're, as you travel, good luck to all of us.
Thank you, Tomi. It's been a pleasure. I really like your show. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Folks, someday I'm going to get to the bottom of all of the conspiracy theories that go on in my head when I'm delayed for hours and then my flight gets canceled. Trust me, someday I will get the answers. But you can catch full episodes of this show on Outkick and Fox Nation whenever you like. Please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Tomi Lahren is Fearless because I will always give it to you straight from Nashville. God bless and take care. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you never miss a beat. I'll be here every weekday, and I hope you'll join me.